You're now listening to the show about the shit in life that's just a bit too much, from the perspective of stand-up comics. With our hosts, Carmelo Bongiovi and Ken Krantz. This week's topic, The Goodest Boy, Part 2, with our guest, Craig Mahoney. This is A Bit Too Much.
My daughter, like some of the plots, and it definitely happens in some books as she's aging up, where like there's darker plots in some of the books. You know, still happy endings, but I remember having this idea. I was very like when we had my daughter. We're very like, I was like, I'm not sugarcoating shit. Like she doesn't need to know. She does, like, we don't have to like hide a bunch of stuff. Like if we're letting her watch a movie, she can watch the whole movie, right? Like. If we don't want her to watch it, we just won't have her watch it. And then we watched The Lion King, and it was a big mistake. She was devastated. When
that ain't no off-screen shit there.
No, right. That's not off-screen. That you watch Mufasa fucking fall.
There's a literal corpse.
And I remember my wife. Yeah, that's true. You do see him like dead.
Yeah.
And my wife fast forwarded the first time, and I was like, I don't even think she'll really even. And then I like being stubborn. Another time we watch it and I let her watch it and she was fucking mortified. She's like, and then he's on the floor and she's like, he's okay, right? Because in her mind, they talk later on when he's in the water. So she's like, he's still alive, right? And then I was like, and she started to understand. It was around the time we started to understand this idea of people passing. We had talked about somebody that passed, and so she was like, I was like, no, this is one of those situations, like that's later on when he talks to him, that's the spirit. She's like, so he's, I remember her saying the words, it's like, so he's dead? And I was like, yeah, he's dead. She's like, his dad is dead? Like the realization was like, and I was like, I fucked up. I should not have showed her this at this age.
Or you should have just let it go because, you know, they Obi-Wan Kenobi'd him and bring him back for like that third act to inspire the hero as a spirit.
Yeah.
So that little kids can still be like, well, he's gone, but he's not really gone, you know, like,
right.
That
By the way,
eases it a little.
Do you remember, you just reminded me, because I was rewatching Star Wars with my wife the other night, and Obi-Wan's like, if you strike me down, I will become more powerful than ever. And then he gets stricken down and he never becomes more powerful than ever. Like he just shows up a couple times like on a log and it's like, hey, what's up? And then he showed up the other time and was like, come on, Luke, use the Force. Like he for sure did not become more powerful.
Yeah, he just became a voice.
Well, I mean, he didn't have to take any spaceship to get to Dagobah, that's for sure. He just, you know, or Endor just shows up wherever he wants. I mean, obviously that's because, you know, he needs to let Luke do it. That's the whole point. The thing. I was recently listening.
Yeah, but he wasn't like, if you strike me down, Luke will become self-sufficient.
Well, then I think, you know, Vader would have been like, who?
Yeah, he said, I'm more powerful. And then he's like, you're not doing shit.
I also love how he was hiding. He was like, Ben Kenobi was like one of the last Jedis and hiding from the Empire. He like had to go into deep hiding. So he changed his name from Obi-Wan Kenobi to Ben Kenobi. Like, like no one was going to think, like, do you think maybe that's the same?
Yeah, I think that's the filmmakers going, like, some of our audience is too dumb to know that this is, like, we got to make it sound good for the, you know, make it sound too familiar for the audience.
I recently, because I was been spending a lot of hours sitting here painting, and recently spent the whole day listening to all the commentaries on the original trilogy Blu-rays.
Yeah.
And everything, you know, Lucas and all, you know, they're all saying. And one thing going back to what we were talking about earlier is he said, you know, because he always said Star Wars was for, you know, something for like 12-year-old boys. It was for children. Yeah. And when he was doing the revelation of Vader as Luke's father at the end of Empire, he wasn't sure, like, is it, you know, our little kids can be able to handle this or something. And he said he went to these child psychologists and like spoke to some people, and they were like, well, they're just going to deny it's true. You know, it's just most people will just say that's not true, you know, like Luke did. And then like, so one of the things, so in Jedi, he had to have that scene where they reiterate it with Yoda and everything that, no, it's definitely true. But he realized that, you know, and then you have the happy ending at the end of Jedi with everybody. But one thing that's brought up a lot, and you hear from Lucas a lot, and you hear from Kirshner, who's director of Empire Strikes Back, and Mark Hamill brings it up, is the way they keep referring, because everyone wants to treat Star Wars now like the way you treat Tolkien or Game of Thrones or Star Trek or whatever, where it's like this mix of hard sci-fi and hard fantasy. And it was really just like pulp pop, sort of like the it wanted to be like
Flash
movie
Gordon.
serials, but they keep referring to it as a fairy tale, and that's what it is. And that's why it's so weird when guys our age start going, "Oh, why did he do this? Why did he do that?" Well, it's a fairy tale.
The arguments that happen amongst grown men, like in anything fantastical like that, like anything that could appear at a Comic-Con. That has that kind of fandom. The arguing that happens amongst grown men is astounding. You know what though? I kept on hearing that like Star Wars was like a ripoff of Dune. You would know more of this, Kuhn. I'm looking at you than I would. First of all, I'm asking you because I then went and I was going to read the Dune books and then I read like 3 words and I'm like, this is a lot. So I ended up doing the audiobooks of Dune. And goddamn, what a snore. That whole series is. It's good. It's very good, but it is so fucking boring. But I could understand what they're saying. Like, there's definitely like a lot of inspiration, it seems, lifted from Dune in Star Wars. But I mean, but they made it marketable and entertaining. Dune is fucking boring. The books.
I remember I have brothers who were huge sci-fi fans. And I remember as a little kid that we all went to see Dune in the movie theater.
Yeah.
And they
with McLaughlin and Sting.
Yes. And I was like a little kid and I liked the Police. So I was like, yeah, I'll go see Sting. Like, that sounds cool.
Okay.
But they actually gave you like a pamphlet that explained a lot.
It's a giant world, yeah.
But it actually, like, if you gotta give the audience, first off, you're sitting there in the dark. How the fuck are you gonna read this thing?
Yeah, dude, I've listened to the audiobooks only a few years ago, and I was like, wait, what the fuck is happening? Because also the Bene Gesserit, which is like the Jedis of Dune, right? Like it's you can tell that they Jedis are of that, but like in Star Wars, they fight and they do cool shit. In the like Jedi mind tricks, that's the whole fucking thing with the Bene Gesserit. There's not as much cool fighting. There's a little bit. There's not really much cool fighting. It's all just fucking mind games, and it's really fucking boring. So you could tell that they were like, all right, if we're gonna lend from this, we've got to have a light up sword. We've got to do some cool shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if that is true, that is lifted from there, which it seems to be. A lot of it seems to be lifted. They definitely made it like. It's like the old German fairy tales that become Disney stories. Like Disney makes it fun. The old German fairy tales are like depressing.
It's also a lot more than that. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. In fact, by the time this gets posted, I'll be relaunching my podcast, Crazy Talk, where the first episode is me solo largely and talking a lot about the Star Wars and the state of the franchise and stuff like that. And here's what I don't even like. I hate that it is a franchise because you look at those first 3 movies, especially the first 2.
Yeah.
And it was never meant to, it is such a mishmash of influences and genres. And like I said, it was never meant to be hard sci-fi or fantasy. Mm-hmm. It's a mix of like, old school movie serials mixed with like, with mythological motifs that creates this sort of pulp fairy tale that also draws from Kurosawa and draws from Dune and draws from Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and draws from Casablanca and, Lawrence of Arabia, and there's like pirates and wizards and knights, and there's like the fussy butler and C-3PO, and there's like the Harpo Marx and R2-D2, and together they're Laurel and Hardy. Like, it's so much shit that like it shouldn't even work. And to try to do that over and over and over again, of course it's gonna fail. Like, Lucas couldn't even make another 3 movies that lived up to those.
Yeah, right. Right.
So it's so weird. They're like, well, now that Disney's really trying to churn all this stuff, they're like, most of it's been crap. And I'm like, most of it is going to end up being crap because to do that is almost impossible.
You can't replicate that over and over again. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's really lightning in a bottle, and it really was. And I like a lot of this. You know, I'm a freaking dork, and I love Star Wars, and I've watched most of the shows and read a lot of the books and comics and stuff. But I really do. When I think of Star Wars, to me, it is still just like that one story, those 3 movies, and it's just a great, you know, just a great work of art. Those 3 things in and of themselves, the original trilogy. Anything after that is just like I don't take it too seriously, especially the non-George Lucas made stuff, and I kind of I go very I'm very a la carte with it. I don't worry about canon or lore or shit like that, you know. And so I go a long diatribe about that in my latest podcast.
It's all fed through a Disney machine at this point. You know what I mean? They're going to keep making shit because they can, because they have all the money in the world,
and they have to because they spent $4 billion.
Yeah.
And they built a giant land with a giant Millennium Falcon and stuff. And they gotta.
Yeah, right.
I remember thinking, like, for years when it was just the original 3 movies, like, that universe is so rich. Why don't they make other movies? Why don't they? And now there's so much. You're like, why don't they stop making this?
Well, it's like the Marvel movies too. It's like they had something with the first few, and then it got so out of control that now they're trying to find. You could tell they're trying to like make movies to find their way back to something good again. But they've been making these the MCU. They've been making movies for almost 20 years now.
Iron Man came out in 2008.
Yeah, that's crazy. To think of a movie universe that has been around that long. I think Star Wars maybe, and Star Wars, there was also a big gap. They weren't steadily making movies for all that time. There was the first 3. They took a very long time before they made those next, right? Yeah. Wasn't it like the 90s when they made more?
Yes.
Yeah, 99. 99. Phantom Menace came out.
And now because of Disney Plus, they make all the shit.
I think it's tough to keep going to the well that often with anything. I think when you're dealing with something like Star Wars, where you have a whole galaxy you can mess around with, it is a little easier, but it's tough to make that all part of one coherent story. Like Andor, I know everyone loves Andor. It's not my type of Star Wars. I like the fun, pulpy fairy tale stuff. I love the first 2 seasons of Mando. I like the fucking cartoons. But like Marvel, where they set it up, it's like, all right, there's these individual superhero stories and stuff, but it eventually all has to tie in. The more it all had to tie into one story, it's like, and again, you caught kind of lightning in a bottle, where you were able to somehow turn out all these movies where most of them were pretty good, if not great. And then you told this great story, and you wrapped it up, and then they got really lucky with casting with a lot of that too, where like it's not just like, oh, where do we go from here story wise? It's like, hey, how do you follow up that whole thing where half the universe dies? I mean, how do you freaking top that? But also, how do you replace Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man and Chris Evans as Captain America and Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow? Like, they're not easy, clearly.
Yeah, there's a world-class actors, in those parts. But you're right, they wrapped it up. And they could have they had an arc that all led to something that could have just ended it and tied it up nicely, and they just kept making more. But it's the Disney Plus engine of it too now. Like, now that they have a platform where they have to put out so much content, there's going to be now there's TV shows too. Like, there's so many tie-ins there. It's like, I just at some point, like, what's gonna, like, do you ever just stop? Will ever just stop?
The problem is too much of pop culture fandom these days has become like sports fandom, where it's like, like Jerry Seinfeld used to have that bit where you're basically like, the players change, they come in and out and stuff, and sometimes the teams will even they'll change stadiums and cities, and you're basically just rooting for laundry, but you're rooting for the name, you're rooting for the brand. And a lot of, if you're a Star Wars, I just love all Star Wars, I'm a Star Wars fan. Well, eventually you're rooting for, you're a Star Wars fan the same way that I'm a Yankee fan, where it's like, the players are going to change and stuff, and you don't really, you're just rooting for them for the sake of rooting for them. But, as Ken and I both know, he's wearing a Giants shirt right now, is you can go a lot of years where you find the wrong people to fill that franchise and man that franchise, and you get shitty product.
It's funny, like, even like the Knicks are on such a run, and they've been so much fun for these last few years, but it's like, it was basically 20 years of even like fielding a good product.
Yeah.
Just we saw after they swept Philly after Game 4, we saw them interviewing a 10-year-old Knicks fan, and he was like, after a lifetime of disappointment with this team, that's like lifetime at you're fucking 10 and they've been good for 4 years.
But also he's a New Yorker, so he's a New Yorker, so he's lived like 3 lifetimes.
That's like dog years.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what,
he's great. He's got a beard.
I was 18 in '96 when the Yankees won their first World Series since the year I was born. And for me, that was, I was like, it did feel like a lifetime. And the funny thing now is you go on, online, you go to Yankees Twitter or whatever, and you see a lot of these like fans who are under 30. And they don't remember they're either weren't alive or were too young to barely remember the dynasty years. They were little kids in 2009 when the Yankees won the World Series. And they've known almost nothing, literally nothing but winning. The Yankees haven't had a losing season since 1991, I think. And they've made the playoffs most years. But because there's that pedigree, and because there's that, guys my age remember watching all those World Series, they act like they're friggin', Cleveland Browns fans. It's insane.
Right. They're always having winning seasons.
There's nothing but misery.
Yeah. I mean, think about the last Knicks team that was causing this much buzz was not even a championship Knicks team. Do you know what I mean? Like when you think when
back to those 90s,
the 90s Knicks weren't even a championship team, but there
hasn't been a championship Knicks team in any of our lifetimes, has there?
Yeah.
No. I was just trying to figure out how old I was.
But to be fair, in the 90s, to be a championship team, you were going to have to go through fucking Jordan, like, you know what I mean? You're gonna have to go through the Bulls, and like there was that was a tough era of basketball.
That is, even in the 90s, you knew most years they're probably not gonna
and that was
they're not gonna get farther than Jordan,
and that was a good team, or there were like maybe 2 iterations of that team was a good team, but you were like, all right, well, every few months Chicago's going to come to town, or we're going to go there and we're going to get embarrassed, and you're going to have a reminder of what's about to happen in the playoffs if we make the playoffs. You know what I mean? That's the last time the Knicks had this much hype.
Well, I was and still am a New Jersey Nets fan, not a Brooklyn Nets fan. A New Jersey Nets fan.
You still are a New Jersey Nets fan.
Talk about having years and years of misery, and then finally in the early 2000s we get Jason Kidd and become the best team in the Eastern Conference. But you got Tim Duncan and the Spurs and Kobe, Shaq, Lakers to go through, and it was that was tough. And then they buy the team to move to Brooklyn and tear the whole thing apart.
But you are right about what you said with like it's the same thing with like some of these franchises, like. You're just rooting for a brand at some point, and you're like you're giving yourself a lifetime of it's like the Phillies, those fans for years, before that World Series win, before that run, whatever, not more than a few years back now, but I mean
2008.
Yeah. Before that, I mean, it's just like there's a bunch of franchises that are just like cursed franchises, sports franchise, and it's like you're born into a sports team, and it's like being born into a shitty family. I've got all my crackhead cousins, and I can't escape them. They're always going to be a part of me. That's how you feel with sports fans, which is funny because you could just stop rooting for the team.
The Knicks are the only. They're the only team I haven't seen win a championship that I root for. And they're the ones that I want the most.
What are your Giants?
So I'm weird. So I'm New York across the board except for baseball.
Yeah,
so
and unfortunately, he has seen his team win a couple World Series.
I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm Giants, Knicks, Rangers, Red Sox.
Yeah, I knew that.
How are you a Red Sox fan? How did that happen?
The first couple games I ever went to in my life were at Fenway. Plus, in addition to that, when I was a little kid, I would stay up every night and watch. They would run an hour of Cheers on Channel 11 from 11 to 12. And I would watch that every single night. And then just between that being my favorite show and them making the Red Sox look so cool, and then actually going to Fenway for
it was
my
weird
first
to me
couple
until
games.
you said Cheers, because that show is so fucking great.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, okay, that makes
like,
sense.
were you disappointed when you found out Mayday Malone was not an actual plan? when you went to the stadium store and you're like, why isn't it? Wait, hang on a second.
That would be a great jersey to own.
They I'm sure they have them. I'm sure you go to Family, right? You'll see them. But it is a thing now. I think part of it, there's always been super fans, and fan is short for fanatic, and there's always been people who make it a huge part of their life and personality. I mean, I make a good portion of my living just from the New York Yankees, between drawing and painting Yankees art. If you look, if I had a wider, screen behind me, you'd see some stuff in progress and some stuff finished. And then, I'm getting that podcast is going to be going back upwards, a Yankee history fandom thing. But there seems to be more people now where it kind of is like it is their life and their personality, and not just with sports, but you're seeing it more with things like Star Wars and stuff like that. And again, this always existed, but I wonder if the reason why you're seeing it more, and I was pondering this too, because of the sort of rise in identity politics, and the whole thing with the internet was, you could be anybody. You're anonymous. You don't have to be, the color of your skin, your sex, your height, what age, doesn't matter. But now with social media, everyone is a content creator. Everyone is trying to post stuff and get attention and have something. And most people, I'm sorry, dear listeners, most people are not that interesting and don't have very interesting things to say. But
no
if
one's
you're
stopping
a fan of something, if you have that identity, if you're whether it's Star Wars fan, Yankees fan, feminist, whatever, you could put that identity, Republican, whatever, then you make that your personality online, and all of a sudden the content creates itself. That's your personality. Like me bringing the dog to the bar, it's like you don't have to worry about the fact that you don't really have anything interesting to say and there's not much going on in your life.
Well, you also have access to so much more. Think about like if you were a fan of something, and from any time basically before the 2000s, you couldn't get it that often. Like, so if you were a comic book fan, you had to first of all, you had to ask your parents for money, and you had to walk your ass to the comic book store, and maybe you could buy 1 or 2 comics. Like, you couldn't just sit there and binge 18 years of Marvel Cinematic Universe on your Disney Plus subscription, have unlimited shit in your face of the thing you love so much, right? Like, you can get access to anything. It's why there's porn addicts, and when they used to just have to go buy a magazine for porn. Like the access to the media is so rich now, and so easy. So easy that if you are a fan of something, you can just make your whole life about that thing. There's unlimited content. There's digital comics if you're a comic book fan. There's all the TV shows, all the movies,
Yeah, and especially with it happening, with it really coming to a head, especially with streaming, because it kind of been building for years with social media, and then, the digital books and stuff. Yeah. And then, online shopping and delivery, and then streaming, and then COVID hits and everyone's stuck at home. And it really becomes your life, most people's lives, for like a year. And I think, it kind of warped us in ways that, it's going to take a long time to go back and study and figure out how much that changed the way people relate to each other and the world. Oh, yeah. But I remember, I don't know, Ken, if you ever heard me do this, it never really worked. I could never really get it to work as a bit, but I would try when I was doing stand-up, would do this thing about, how like when we were kids and we wanted porn, you had to work for it. You'd have to go like dumpster diving behind the convenience store or something. You
had to go digging through your dad's shit.
Yeah.
When he wasn't home.
To find an unsold issue of Hustler that was still that wasn't, completely caked and disgusting with trash. And it's like now you could be online at the supermarket and you just whip out your phone and it's like, interracial bukkake porn or something right there.
At the supermarket.
I still remember being a little kid watching TV in my parents' room and just happening to glance under the bed and seeing a videotape. Mm-hmm. And I glanced at it quickly and I thought it said Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And I'm like, I fucking love that movie. It's weird that my parents would have it under their bed. Right. But I'm going to watch it. And I put it in and it was, I want to say it was like Indiana Jones and like the Temple of Poon or something like that.
Yeah, it was.
And that was like my first experience with. It was not what I expected for sure. But I was also like, well, I don't really hate this.
Yeah, I told the story of the podcast. How I found my brother's porn stash. He had a bunch of VHS tapes of like, and they were labeled like 80s movies, like Bloodsport and Young Bloods and all these like 80s movies. You found all these 80s movies.
I'm not making that up.
Oh, is that really the title? Is that really the title?
Was there a porn version of Was there a porn version of Mola Ram, because he was into some forced penetration?
But it was so hard to get your hands on that shit, to the point where like I feel like we made porn in our heads out of like just just swimsuit picture. You know what I mean? Like we had to make it in our heads because it just wasn't available. But it's the same thing with all this fandom stuff. It's
like a Mom's Victoria's Secret catalog. I was like, holy shit.
Dude, not even like the Sears catalog.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it didn't even fucking matter. I was like, oh, I see an ankle. I see
the scrambled spice channel.
Yeah, remember the scrambled channels? And if you like went on the channel, it would clear up for a second.
Yeah.
I remember going back and forth, like trying to make a picture with my it was almost like making porn out of a flip book. Like I was like going back and forth in the channel to try to get the frame to like the way we had, you're right though, the way we had to work for that shit. So it goes along.
Today, they don't know. We had to work. We had to work for our ejaculations.
Yeah.
Hey, now it's so easy.
So how do people find your children's book?
Well, it's funny because when I used it to kind of relaunch the Substack, is to put it out there. So if you go to craigmahoney.substack.com, you'll find it. But then I'm like, what? I'm like, it's got to eventually be its own thing. But I'm like, whatever. I'm not doing this to be a children's book author. I'm doing it because I just wanted to do this story.
Yeah.
And it kind of and my old man died like 4.5 weeks after my dog did in that summer, and he was my youth baseball coach. He was my school's baseball coach and stuff. So he's in there as the kids baseball coach in the book. So it was like something I wanted to do for me, and but I wanted to get it out there because I'm like, what do I do about the rest of my stuff? Do I when I go on this podcast, am I going to watch what I say, or am I just going to be me? And I was like, yeah, I'll just be me. And the book will be something, nobody, if Sarah Silverman can voice Disney characters, then I can still.
Yeah, I think you'll be all right. Yeah.
Still do this shit. But yeah, you go to craigmahoney.substack.com and you will, find the book and all my other shit. You find my Disney stuff, my Yankee stuff, and then I'm doing all my art and paintings. Will be weekly roundups. I'm doing a few different series of things right now that I'm trying to have going on through the year because it's the 100th birthday of both Miles Davis and John Coltrane this year. And I love them both. So I'm trying to do it I'm trying to see if I can do 100 different drawings or paintings or quick little sketches of both of them over the course of the year. So that's an ongoing thing. And then it is America's 250th birthday this year. So I'm going to be doing a series of paintings of just, somewhat patriotic stuff. Just there'll be some very obvious things like a Washington and Lincoln. And then, I'm doing an Apollo 11 one, and then, just a Baldy, anything that kind of fits into that Americana patriotism stuff. So there will be all sorts of stuff, and maybe even occasional, some music or whatever. It's just going to be where I just do all my shit. But if you want the children's book, it'll be there, and you can, you can read it right there. There will be a digital version released separate from that coming soon. And then, there's just going to be a hodgepodge or whatever I feel like putting out there.
Yeah, very cool, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
It was
Thank you for
good seeing you, buddy.
Yeah, good seeing you. You look good.
You look good.
Oh, thank you.
It's a bit too much podcast. Thanks, man.
I remember.